Be good to go. There we go. Perfect. I'll now hand you over to Paul from Big Blue Door, who's going to commence proceedings. Thank you, Paul.
Nice. Thanks, Tim. Can people see my screen? Just a bit of a nod. Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. Hi, everyone. As Tim says, yeah, basically a continuation from a presentation that we gave at the LGD week last year, which is really nice. It's essentially a bit of a look at the work that we've been doing with Southwark Council. I'm checking I can move that on. Yeah, essentially rebuilding their digital estates using LocalGov Drupal. Just some quick introductions from me. I'm Paul. I'm one of the managing partners at Big Blue Door. We've essentially been the development partner for the project. I'm going to be doing some of the presentation with Julia. Julia is one of the web project managers at Southwark, so always nice to kind of hear from the council directly about how the project's been going from their perspective. Alice is going to contribute from a product delivery director's perspective. Alice has been essentially the main point of contact for the council within Big Blue Door. And Simon, who is our client services director at BBD, he's going to be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you've got any questions, drop them in there. We will try and kind of get to them at the end. And yeah, we will share the slides afterwards as well. Yeah, it's very much been a kind of collaborative effort. We'll talk about the kind of wider partners further on down the line. But for now, I'm going to pass to Julia, who's going to give a little bit of background to where the project came from and so on. Julia.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, like Paul said, I'm Julia Aguiar, web project manager at Southwark Council, and yeah, really happy to talk through some of updates and reflections really on our new corporate website and our first LGD microsite going live. So to start with some of the problems with our previous CMS, which a lot of the problems and issues are really down to the fact that it was a proprietary CMS. Because of that, we were locked into the vendor. It was quite costly for the council. It looked quite outdated. There were accessibility issues. The back end was really clunky and lacking in a lot of basic functionality you would expect in a CMS. Pages would lock really easily, which would frustrate our content team. And I think because in the end, we were the only council using this CMS and working with the CMS provider, it meant that we were quite siloed. And I think our distinctive needs as a council website were not being met. We also had a really horrible search feature. And yeah, all of this led to broader content governance issues. The technology made it so that access to the back end had gotten quite devolved. By the end, we had something like over 500 users across the council with access to the back end with varying permissions. But it was concerning and meant that some services would make their own content changes, which really should have gone through a content designer. And that was also true for microsites. We had a lot of different providers and owners of microsites outside of my team, which created problems when there was an incident or issue with the microsite and figuring out whose microsite it was, because the microsite had been built so long ago by a development agency, maybe that the service procured on their own, and the service contact we had since left the council. So that created a lot of issues, and I think, yeah, allowed for some shadow IT to fester. So then moving on to what LGD has offered us and how LGD has addressed a lot of these problems. So on the whole, what appealed to us about moving to LocalGov Drupal was the lively and collaborative community dedicated to continuous learning. I think as reflected in LGD Week, we felt that we could also get best value for money with the open supplier market and not being locked into a vendor. And then some of the more specific functionality that LGD offers us that, someone to mute there, I think. Get that one out. Thank you. So yeah, some of the particular functionality that LGD offers that our old CMS didn't is more user roles and better controlled user permissions, so that we never get hopefully back to a place where we have over 500 people with access to the back end doing goodness knows what. And so that only people with who are set up in our new CMS have justification to be set up, and limited permissions at that, so that they can only control content that they should be. We also now have a content review process, which is really great. So the ability in LGD to set up content review reminders means that we can regularly review content and keep it to a high standard, so that we don't lose all of the amazing work that BBD did on the content audit in collaboration with our content team. Which, just to touch on the content audit and rewrite, yeah, this means that the content we now have on the website is updated, and it's been redesigned. BBD did a much needed overhaul of our information architecture, which has made for easier navigation in the site. And I think this is all really important in the context of local government, because it builds trust for residents in us, which is really important. And then rolling out the LGD microsites distribution is really exciting and good for us, because it now means that we have a centralized microsite CMS, which will address a lot of the governance concerns I mentioned earlier. So in summary, I would say that, the LGD technology and working with Big Blue Door in particular gave us the tools we need to make the necessary changes in terms of, addressing some of those governance issues and implementing best practices to offer a website that is now working a lot better for residents, which is, really who we did it for. So that's it for me for now. I think, am I passing to Alice?
Back to
Or
me.
back to Paul. Sorry, Paul, back to you.
And all good. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of some of the kind of delivery approach that we've kind of been on. Worth saying, I think some LGD projects are certainly bigger than others. This is definitely one of the bigger ones. This has been around about 15 months from kind of start to finish, from a kind of, well, I say finish, we're still going really, certainly from kind of onboarding. And I think it's fair to say that Julia and the team were working kind of behind the scenes for at least 2 or 3 months before that, kind of laying the groundwork. So definitely kind of one of the larger ones. I know, to be fair, we've worked on some LGD projects that are kind of 3 months, start to finish. This is not one of those. Hopefully this slide kind of just gives a bit of an idea of some of the areas that we've worked on, both in terms of the discovery, things like stakeholder workshops, brand workshops. There's been an entire kind of new brand implemented as part of this project. We've done lots of kind of user interviews. We've done persona development. We've done wireframing. And then one of the things I did want to emphasize here is you can kind of see that after the wireframing, we did user testing to kind of validate what the work we'd done. After the visual design, we did user testing. So iterative testing throughout the process, which has been really great. We actually did that on the kind of the design system as well before we kind of got into the actual technical build. Really big kind of content phase. The old site had somewhere around 3,300 pages to start with, to kind of give a sense of scale. Alice is going to talk a little bit more about that work strand. And as Julia's mentioned, the kind of the microsites platform in addition as well. It's very much been an agile delivery approach, as I think most people would kind of expect. That's pretty kind of classic, I think, for most LGD projects. We've worked very collaboratively. Southwark have provided a lot of resource internally across the kind of various skill sets. From a Big Blue Door perspective, we've provided all the kind of project management that you'd probably expect, but also kind of product design, UX design, content designers as well. All of the kind of development resource you'd probably expect to see, front-end specialists, back-end as well, full DevOps. The site's hosted on AWS. We've used kind of fairly traditional agile ceremonies, but it's fair to say it's been fairly flexible. We've run most of these ceremonies internally. The Southwark team have been able to kind of dial into those as and when resources are allowed. We're very conscious, councils, and there's lots of you on the call today, you're super busy. You can't necessarily allocate all of the time to kind of dial into every backlog planning session, every retrospective, every demo. So while we've kind of stuck to that, we haven't kind of had too much of a need for everyone to be on every session. So just quickly in terms of the discovery, yeah, so some of the kind of top level and analysis of what we've done. Full analytics review at the start of the project. We completed 6 stakeholder workshops, kind of group sessions across the council, 3 card sorting workshops, whole bunch of user interviews that's been kind of peppered throughout the delivery process. Benchmarking of other sites, I use the word kind of competitors quite loosely. We looked at a number of other council sites, both within the LGD space, but also externally. We reviewed sites that were using other systems, things like Jardu as well, just to see what was working well, what lessons we could kind of get from that as well. Full wireframing kind of piece using Figma. We basically had kind of full clickable prototype that we could again test. Essentially, before we even started thinking about design, did we have the layout right? Basically kind of building up evidence that things were working in the way that they should. Persona generation, got something on that in a second. And yeah, a really extensive piece on the IA, particularly with that kind of volume of content. We've looked to see how we can kind of streamline routes into the content and basically streamline that kind of customer journey. Yeah, I think we did, I think it was 11 personas in the end. And if I take you onto the wireframe kind of slide, you'll see here kind of essentially 11 user journeys. So we tried to basically have our wireframe prototype with a key user journey for every single persona, so that again, we can kind of test that to check that things were working in terms of layout, position of content, and so on as well. And yeah, moderated and unmoderated testing on the wireframes. You kind of get a sense here. We used a platform called UserBrain for some of the testing. 17 questions we asked as one of the rounds here. You can kind of see a stat here. 13 out of the 17 questions had a kind of 90% plus positive response rate. So we were very much kind of grounding everything we did in evidence that things were working before we kind of moved on to the next phase of the project, which I think was really important. So yeah, just briefly in terms of the design, we did 3 basic design routes for the project. They were reviewed internally by Julia and colleagues. We did a heat map review of the designs, again, to kind of see what was working and what wasn't. Tested with 28 users, so quite extensive. If you have a chance to look at the live site, you'll see it doesn't necessarily look like a completely sort of stock LGD site. It's very different. It is very creative, which is really nice. We had a fully clickable prototype in Figma, both for desktop and mobile, that we could test. And we designed all of the paragraph components at 4 different screen sizes as well. We kind of really pushed the design system on this one, which is really nice to have done. And it is a full rebrand for the council, which has kind of meant quite a lot of working with kind of third-party providers so that they could update systems way beyond that kind of classic, here's a CSS style sheet, go and retheme. It's been a lot more extensive than that. And yeah, just a quick kind of visual on some of the designs. If you take a look at the live site, you'll see it's a bit of a hybrid of a couple of these in the end, which has worked out really well. Yeah, just a bit of a review of the kind of the heat map generation that we used. Again, that was just to kind of test our placement of content on the page. And yeah, just worth mentioning, we've actually launched publicly the design system. That's essentially on the Figma community. So other councils, other providers can access that. And again, some of those third-party systems, as well as getting style sheets, they can dive in and see working buttons. They can get the code for that. They can see rollover effects. So really helps with that kind of seamless user journey across different systems, which has been really nice. Okay, I'm going to pass to Alice for the content audit. Alice.
Thanks, Paul. So very, very early on, as Julie mentioned in her intro, the team at Southwark identified some issues with their existing content on the old site. It clearly wasn't kind of fit for purpose for their residents. For example, it didn't meet GDS standards. There were issues with accessibility, things like line length, long pages, really heavy text-based content. It had clearly kind of grown organically over time without a clear way to review legacy content. As Julia touched on, the kind of content review process wasn't really in place. It was often kind of out of date. It was often duplicated across multiple places in the site as well. And due to that kind of organic growth, the information architecture was really complicated. Combined with a poor search feature, it meant that content was often really, really hard to find, and residents just weren't being able to self-serve with the way that we want them to. So we delivered a content project spanning around 8 months. It was delivered in partnership with Enviews, who completed the first phase of the content audit. They did a few months on it. Became quite apparent quite quickly that it was going to be a much longer project, and we ended up bringing in 3 full-time content designers, so Big Blue Door content designers, and a part-time peer reviewer as well. So yeah, 8 months in total, and yeah, 3 full-time content designers in total, plus obviously a huge amount of work from the internal Southwark content team as well. So really, really big focus on content rewrite and audit for this one. In terms of kind of what we did then, so rework of the information architecture, I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. We reviewed and redrafted all pages on the site across all service areas. Resulted in a 20% reduction in content. Paul touched on this. There were, I think, just under 3,500 pages on the old site. So really kind of big job in terms of the content review. As mentioned, we had that kind of team of 3 full-time editors. Working really closely with Southwark stakeholders as well. I think one of the biggest challenges, we'll come back to a little bit, was identifying and accessing the right people. There was no way in the previous CMS of highlighting the owner for a piece of content, and it hadn't been captured anywhere across the council. So there was a huge piece of work, both kind of supported by us, but mostly the Southwark team, to try and find those content owners and work out the best stakeholders for each different service area. So that was a really, really kind of big chunk of this. The kind of the working relationship between our team and Southwark's content team was completely crucial to making sure that was a success. And yeah, really nice to see kind of how that worked in practice. Worth mentioning the Perfect Day. So that's the new registrar's website that's gone live. It's a separate microsite, also using LGD, but the microsite distribution. So that was also in scope for this phase of the work. The microsite content was kind of drafted in line with the rest of the service area. So picked up with the births, deaths and marriages service area, but content for the microsite as well as the main site. In terms of the actual rewrite, as you'd expect, the team worked in adherence with GovUK and GDS standards. We did things like significantly reducing the reading age of all content. We worked with the content team at Southwark on kind of content design principles and how to make the best out of the LGD paragraph components. Again, I'll come back to that. And then the Southwark content team did the monumental effort and work of adding all the content into the LGD website as well. So yeah, kind of huge hats off to the team at Southwark for that one. It was a big undertaking. So in terms of kind of a few things, a bit more detail, information architecture was one of the big ones. So the first big piece of work that our team embarked on, and Enviews kind of worked on at the beginning as well, was the mapping of their existing information architecture on their old site. We used Figma or FigJam to map out the entire site. And as Paul mentioned, we ran several card sorting workshops to work through the best way to design the IA, basically, using the personas that we drafted, using the customer journeys that we had identified, and essentially looking at what was undiscoverable, what was hard to find, and looking at iterating on a proposed IA based on those journeys and making sure the content was in a logical and findable format. To give you a sense of what that looked like in practice, next slide, please, Paul. Thank you. So previously, the council's website had 30 or so level 1 menu items. That's quite a lot. So the information architecture work we did, the card sorting work we did, and all the kind of customer journey mapping, and alongside the main content audit, allowed us to get to a place where we've got 15 level 1 service menu items. So reduction of 50% and a much, much clearer and easier to navigate structure, which is a really nice place to be. In terms of the content redraft then, so we reviewed 3,500 pages, and the first kind of task for each of those was to do a relatively ruthless process to go through whether a page was fit for purpose and could kind of remain as it is, whether it needed a full review rewrite, or whether it could be removed entirely from the website. So we looked at things like the user need being the kind of main one. We were pretty pretty careful to make sure that we could identify a really clear user need from the stakeholders of each page for each page before we decided what we were going to be doing with it. That kind of worked in various different ways. So it looked at whether or not it was a duplication of content across the site. It looked at whether it was a duplication of content that can be available externally, i.e. does it need to be on the Southwark Council website? If not, we should link off to the external site rather than duplicate the content. We also looked at the evergreen nature of content as well, and whether or not it needed a specific place within the site. So really kind of clear criteria that we worked with the stakeholders on in terms of whether a page was needed. If it is it fit for purpose, or does it need that rewrite? For the pages that were rewritten, so we, as I mentioned, our content editors obviously worked in line with GDS standards, looked at reading age, sentence length, and actually in particular kind of content design principles as well, to make sure that we're making the most of the LGBT paragraphs, but also that your pages are kind of engaging and easy to digest. The content team at Southwark then embarked on the big epic journey of adding the content into the site. This actually happened alongside the build. Really powerful thing from LGD is that essentially once you've got the base install, once you've done a few tweaks to the base install, you can essentially get started on uploading content. So it means we can overlap that content upload process with the build, and it basically reduces the length of the project down a bit as well. So really nice that the content team could get started on adding content, even though the site hadn't kind of been fully built or themed, which was a helpful way to reduce delays in the project. Next slide, please, Paul. Thank you. Okay, so to touch on the development phase, it was, thank you. It was around 10 months development all told. Kind of back end of last year, we went live relatively recently, and we had dedicated kind of back end and front end developers throughout the project. We actually kept the development team pretty small, despite the kind of size of the build. Wanted a team that were really familiar with the technical side of it. And yeah, really well-informed team. So both back end and front end, but really quite a neat team from our side throughout the project. We worked in fortnightly sprints as part of the main build, and then kind of worked more ad hoc towards the end of the project. So more formalized sprint pattern for the bulk of it. And then as we got into the kind of feedback iterations towards the back end of the project, it was more ad hoc, depending on what the team had fed back. We worked across multiple environments. As you'd expect, our developers had their local machines. We had our development environment for our initial QA and testing. And then we had a staging or demo site, which is where the Southwark Council team added their content. They were then moved on to the production environment closer to launch. It's worth also saying they've got a separate CMS dot for their production environment CMS, just improves kind of performance and security on the production environment, which is nice. We managed our own functional regression, user testing, and accessibility testing throughout the project. That was kind of in-house at BPD, and obviously alongside kind of UAT from Julia and her team. And then ahead of the site going live, we Southwark brought in external agencies to test. So we had Zunu as a partner for the accessibility audit, and then NCC Group as a partner for the penetration test. And then, yeah, as mentioned a couple of times, alongside this project, and I realise this is just one little square on this page, alongside this project, we also built the microsite distribution. So designed by another agency, but built by us, and we have recently gone live with the first microsite on that site. So that's their Perfect Day registrar site. But yeah, as Julia mentioned, a really nice thing is they've got plenty of microsites to come on that. So yeah, a little throwaway line there, but that was a whole separate website build alongside this project as well. In terms of what we delivered then, so we started with a completely fresh LocalGov install. It was the first Drupal 10 install we did actually from the beginning. We'd done many upgrades from 9 to 10, but this one was actually the first one we started in Drupal 10. So it was actually really nice to see that kind of smooth setup of that almost a year ago now, but in fact, probably slightly over a year ago now. But yeah, really nice for us to have that first Drupal 10 from the beginning. The site itself is a really good mix of core LGD functionality and bespoke features specific to Southwark. So we're using the full breadth of the kind of main page templates that come with LGD, all your landing pages, your service pages, your guides, your step-by-steps, your newsroom, your news articles, your events and your event listing, your directories. We're also talking about getting the publications module installed at some point. I know the content team have kind of been testing it at the back end to see if it's something that they might want in the future. But yeah, really nice use of kind of the vast majority of the core LGD page templates. And then we have also taken advantage of around 20 of the paragraph components. So I think LGD out the box comes with about 30 or 35. So we're using just over kind of half of those paragraphs. And those have been designed and built to ensure that the content team can build really nice, engaging, but still consistent content across the site. So we're using things like the documents listings rather than hyperlinking documents. We're using calls to action for big promoted sections of text. We're using accordions where necessary as well. So really, really nice use of those different paragraph components to ensure consistent and engaging content across the site. I'm going to pass to Julia, who's going to tell you a bit more about kind of custom development. So things that we built outside of LGD that have been specific to Southwark.
Thanks, Alice. Yeah, the custom development was really exciting for us and a way for our site to kind of stick out from the rest. So to walk you through some of the custom features we built, or BBD built, I should say, custom roles and workflow. I think I talked through that a little bit, so in the interest of time, I'll just leave that. Third-party CSS style sheets. So as mentioned, the website launch happened alongside a rebrand for the council. So BBD put together these third-party CSS style sheets, which will allow us to update our third-party application so that they align with our new branding guidelines, which was a big undertaking and yeah, really valuable for us to have going forward. We implemented Azure Active Directory or Microsoft Entra ID single sign-on. This is important for us to do because it's one of our application standards. And what this means is that access to the CMS is very controlled, and users also have to go through multi-factor authentication. So a good cybersecurity practice. Your community, this is live on the site, so would encourage people to go check it out for themselves. But essentially residents can come here to learn about all things happening within Southwark and ways that they can get involved. And then if we just move to the next slide, talk through the bespoke landing pages. So this gives key service areas and more public-facing campaigns across the council a distinct look and feel. They're more image-led designs, and yeah, services have been really happy with them. They've kind of accomplished what we wanted to in terms of, again, promoting some of these key campaigns. So climate emergency being one. We also have a banner to that section on the home page. So that team was quite pleased. Southwark Presents, this is a section showcasing all the events we have within Southwark, and users can filter events by different fields. So that's been, yeah, really well received. Cluedo, our custom site search via Cluedo. As mentioned, our previous search feature was a real pain point. It was essentially useless, and users were reliant on Google to search for Southwark Council content. So there's been a bit of a culture shift there with encouraging services and residents to use the internal search feature. But it's, yeah, a worlds of a difference. It's much improved. Yeah, users can now properly use the search feature to find the content they're looking for. And what's also nice about Cluedo is we have access to my Cluedo, so sort of the back end of the search feature, and we can further fine tune it ourselves. So we can do things like rank certain pages. We can boost different sections. It also has an analytics feature, so we can see what our users searching for and not finding in the results, so that we can work on it. So that's been a really great thing to have, and we've again got a lot of great feedback on that. And then to move on to coming soon, so we've got the creatives directory, which brings together the different creatives at work in Southwark. They can submit a creatives profile, and again, really spotlighting all the amazing creativity we have in the borough. Where I live, this is a geospatial feature where users will input their Southwark postcode, and they can find out a lot of different information about their area. So things like bin collection days, nearby libraries and leisure centers, warm spaces. And it's also an area that we can really build on as long as we have the data set. So our GIS managers, really excited to get that one live. Then properties to let. So this gives an overview of properties to let in the borough. And that's, I think, really great one to have, because we know that Southwark is the biggest local authority landlord. And housing in general gets a lot of attention. And then to move on to communal breakdowns. So this just provides, again, an overview of all the active outages and different fixes to estate properties in the area, which is was a really high traffic area in the old site. We've thrown some more requirements at BBD, so again, watch the space for that one. And this is one where the service needs to have sort of permissions to add to it. So we're working on some user roles to get them set up and have it so that they have ownership over that area. Some of these features we had in our old website, but can confidently say they're much improved in the new website, some newer ones, and just overall a more modern look and feel. So it's been really exciting for us to roll some of these out, and like I said, watch this space for the others to come. So I'll pass back to Paul.
Nice. Thanks, Julia. Yeah. Just a quick bit on testing. As you'd kind of expect, we've reviewed all of our kind of code to Drupal coding standards. We've done a mix of moderated and unmoderated testing, but I think the big thing I kind of wanted to highlight here is the actual kind of in-person testing with residents. Basically the team did testing with a kind of range of users with different access needs. So people with visual impairments, physical disabilities, neurodiversity issues as well. So we kind of did all of that in person, and then essentially kind of iterated on the results that we got from that. That was a really nice thing to do as part of this project. Definitely something that, isn't always possible due to kind of time, budgets and so on, but it was in this one, which was really nice. I think probably in thinking about time, I'll kind of go relatively quickly, but all of the kind of wider testing, accessibility testing, WCAG 2.2, all of the kind of types of things that I think most people here would expect. We've had kind of functional tests as part of all of our software development tickets as well. So just in terms of a quick wrap up, just a couple of slides left. Key kind of things that we've learned that we thought was worth pulling out. Particularly around the kind of the content strand. So quick reminder, 3,300 pages to start with. It was a mammoth undertaking. Finding those kind of stakeholders and engaging with them early was absolutely key, because it really was a huge task. Good content takes a lot of time. Thinking that you're going to rewrite content in a couple of months, it's just really unrealistic, particularly with a good, accurate kind of peer review process, training people in writing well for the web, uploading content with a nice content design into the system. It really does take time to get that right. We kind of mentioned about the kind of the sprint processes, the ceremonies. That's all really nice, but I think having kind of transparent systems has been really key for us. It's enabled you know, Julia and the wider team to kind of dive in when they've had time and capacity to see where we as an agency are up to in the project. They don't need to wait for the kind of the weekly meeting. They can just jump in when they've got a quick spare 10 minutes to see, right, this is the very latest on the project. I think that's been nice. Key, very, very key, senior stakeholder buy-in, absolutely critical, particularly within the council, particularly around things like the rebrand, kind of getting that sign off, getting that energy, also encouraging the content owners to kind of fully engage with the project. There's nothing quite like the executive board, senior directors having your back, and we definitely had that as part of this project. That's been really invaluable. User testing throughout the delivery phases has been key. It's meant that we've kind of grounded every phase in proper evidence. We knew that we were on the right track at every point, or we could quickly kind of make updates. Having external specialists as well has been really nice. Basically that independent review of accessibility. Yes, we as an agency did our own review, but actually getting in a third party with a completely fresh perspective is really nice. I think most people on this call, we all kind of recognize, you know, accessibility, it's not a pass or fail metric. It's very nuanced. So having additional ideas on that's been really key. And also around the kind of the security updates. So vulnerability scanning, pen testing as well. Just another third party to look over the systems before it went live has been really nice. Yeah, navigating the rebrand and a new CMS simultaneously can be quite complex and challenging. That's probably why it's taken us 15 months, but equally really rewarding as well. And yeah, having that kind of joined up project approach across all of the different partners, I think has definitely been really key from our perspective. And that's kind of why we wanted to end here, really. The partnerships approach has been absolutely critical. You know, in my view, you know, Southwark as a council have kind of got in lots of different providers who specialize and are very good at certain things. And I think that's worked really well. Whole range of people, the council themselves, us at Big Blue Door, shared technology services, that's kind of the internal IT team, NCC Group for the pen testing, Zunu for the accessibility audit, InViews on the content side as well, Cluedo for search, Namiko as well, we haven't mentioned them. They did a piece around Google Tag Manager analytics, kind of getting that set up absolutely right from day one. So yeah, that's been really nice. We're sort of gradually moving into BAU now, as you kind of expect. But yeah, a final stat there. Julia kind of crunched some numbers, and you know, the council are looking at a kind of 20% ongoing cost reduction from using LGD. That's ongoing support maintenance. So, you know, let alone all of the savings from not paying for kind of licenses and so on. So that's for me the big one. I think the LGD community, we all know LGD is great. We know a lot about the features, but actually you can do some good, you can help other councils, and you can save some money, which, let's face it, right now is key for absolutely everyone. I think that's it. We're going to pause for any questions. I haven't looked at the chat, so yeah, anything we need to jump into, Simon, Tim, go for it.
Jackie's question: what was the size of the implementation team for the project? I'm not sure whether Jackie means Big Blue Door side or Southwark side or both.
I can definitely cover that off from our side. So we have had 3 people from a kind of project delivery side. We've had 2 from a creative design and UX side, and we've had 3 developers as well, plus 1.5 DevOps. Slightly flexing throughout the project as phases have emerged, but that's the broad kind of size. Julia, what about your side?
Yeah, so on the Southwark side, our content team, our permanent content team, is made up of 4. So we have 3 web editors who on a day-to-day basis are in the back end of the CMS, and then a content designer who kind of oversees content more generally. To get us to go live, we did bolster the team, so we had 3 additional content designers join us. So that's the content team. On the delivery side, it was myself and our program lead. Otherwise, as mentioned, we outsource our IT department, so we have an external IT provider. So there was a project manager on their side, but their technical team, it really depended on what we needed them to do at any given time. But typically we at least had one engineer working on some technical work. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a sense of the Southwark team.
Alistair Waring has a question. Does the properties to let, does that use LGD directories?
No, it doesn't actually. It uses a custom content type and listing. So it's a Drupal view, mostly because of the different permissioning structure that we needed for those ones, and slightly different field structure. It wasn't a traditional directories one. We are using the directories for other things, but that one was a custom build.
Phil Gardner asks, would you have any idea of the total spend for this project in pounds?
Yeah,
No idea.
I don't mind sharing. Maybe we could give a ballpark, just around 300K. So yeah, I recognize that we were quite lucky to have the budget to do some of this custom dev work. But again, we were with our old CMS provider for decades, maybe as long as I've been alive. So it was, yeah, much overdue. And again, I think having the LGD technology and the partnership with BBD really sets us on a good course. And again, thinking about the cost savings we're getting and ongoing support and hosting fees is really great. But yeah, in the interest of transparency, that's the budget we were working with. Hope that's helpful.
To add to that, you spent over 6 years before we started working with you £1 million with your previous CMS company.
Yeah,
So
indeed. Yeah,
just
put it in perspective.
Yeah. Jess from Northumberland says, do you still have any content editors within services? And if so, why? Question for Julia.
Yeah, so we do. I mentioned the communal breakdowns section that is going to be managed by the service in terms of making those content changes. So that's an example. Also, Southwark Presents and adding events to that. The service is set up with permissions to do that themselves in the CMS. We have another section where we add major works projects. That is another example of a service having access in the CMS. Again, it's limited permission, so they're only doing what they need to do in the CMS. Again, we're really trying to avoid this devolved sort of way of working that we had with our old CMS, where we just had so many different people with access. And the reason really is that to take the communal breakdowns team, for example, communal breakdowns is a section that needs to get updated approximately every 2 hours. So it's just not realistic for us to make the service come through our team every time. That would create a lot of bottlenecks. And it's also a section that needs to get updated out of hours. And there's, yeah, compliancy issues there. So it was important for us to give that service direct access. They've had training. And we'll continue to support them on that. But that's, yeah, some of the reasons for why we give some services limited permissions, because it's just not realistic with a small permanent content team for everything to come through us.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Julie mentioned this on the kind of custom functionality. We've got a really quite large selection of user roles and permissions. Drupal, whilst obviously LGD comes out the box with various roles, Drupal itself is incredibly powerful from a permissioning perspective. So we've got roles that can only do very, very, very specific things in the council. So it's not kind of, full risk is mitigated in terms of these users having access. They can only do what they really need to do. Obviously, Julia's team and the content team have all the access they need to kind of add content across the site, but then these very devolved service areas have access to specifically what they need to be able to do, which really, really easy to do within Drupal, which is nice.
Any more questions? Thanks, Jazz.
Thanks very much, guys. That was a really fantastic session. You've already started getting good feedback in the chat, so I imagine the feedback after the event is going to be great. It's really interesting, and the site is amazing as well. So congratulations to all of you who've been involved. It's a really great example of how to use the platform. Thanks to everyone for coming. I hope you found it useful as well.